Palace intrigue. Who doesn't like palace intrigue? We have trouble brewing between Kamala and Joe Biden. I'm going to give you the latest, and I'm going to tell you why. Plus, a Supreme Court win for once. All that's coming up on I'm Right.
But I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Ooh, that sounds serious, especially when you're Kamala Harris. You see, Kamala Harris is finding herself in a bit of trouble. What kind of trouble? Well, quote, not a healthy environment. This is from Politico, by the way. Kamala Harris office rife with dissent. 22 current and former staffers spoke to Politico anonymously to raise concern about Kamala Harris and how she treats employees. Here's a quote from someone with direct knowledge of how the Harris office is run. Quote, people are thrown under the bus from the very top. There are short fuses, and it's an abusive environment. It's not a healthy environment, and people often feel mistreated. It's not a place where people feel supported, but a place where people feel treated like beep, because it's a family show. I can't tell you that word, but you can figure it out. Now, let's stop here for just a moment, and I'm going to tell you a couple things that are actually going on. One, first and foremost, this was a hit piece on Kamala Harris that ran in Politico. I'm not sure if there's a more communist publication out there besides maybe Pravda than Politico. What does that mean? Joe Biden did this. Politico doesn't run this piece without Joe Biden, or at least Joe Biden's camp, either flat out giving it to Politico or in the very least signing off on it. What's actually in the article is not that big of a deal. I'll address it in a moment, but what's actually in the article is not the end of the world. What this tells you is there's enough tension between the Harris camp and the Biden camp. They're now leaking things to their press allies. Hey, I heard Joe wasn't doing that well. You might want to run that in the Washington Post. Hey, Politico, I heard Kamala Harris treats her employees terribly. Go ahead and run a little hit piece on her. These people all have allies in the media. That's how politics works. Remember that. Republicans do too. Now, obviously not nearly as many as Democrats, because basically the entire media is Democrat, but they all have allies in the media. Allies who will run things for them if they want. Remember, every industry, yours is not unique. Every industry is simply about circles of friends, little circles of friends. Whatever you do for a living, whether it's construction, lawyer, doctor, whatever it is, you have little circles of friends. It's no different in politics. Politics, media, shoot, me. If I want a hit piece run on somebody, I could probably make that happen with one phone call. I don't think I'd ever do that. I'd just come say it on my show if I had a problem with somebody, but everybody knows a guy, right? And so that's how it works in this level of politics. That's one. This tells you there's real tension between Biden and Kamala. Two, let's address the actual specifics of this. All right, 22 current and former staffers, that's a lot. That's a lot. I generally don't listen to disgruntled former employee guy because there's always one turd who gets hired and he sucks and you got to throw him out the back door and he blames everybody except himself on the way out. And of course he'll run and go grab the local news reporter and say, man, I heard this guy's a real jerk. So, okay, dismiss that. 22 is a pattern. That's a lot. So why would Kamala Harris's office be run this way? Allow me to be offensive and just tell you who Kamala Harris is. I'm not going to go into nitty-gritty, dirty details here because it's a family show, but let's do just a brief rewind here. We understand how Kamala Harris got her start in politics, right? The whole dating Willie Brown thing. We understand that, right? I mean, he was married, she was dating, and whatever. Look, I'm not passing judgment. I'm not giving details. I'm about to establish a pattern for you, okay? So Kamala Harris gets her start that way. He gives her a boost because he's a major, major power broker in California politics. So she did her part, and then Willie did his part and gave her a big boost. Well, Willie Brown to this day will say Kamala Harris and her people, they won't acknowledge his existence or take her calls. Okay, so they have a thing, and then she gets the boost she wants, and then she sets him aside and moves on. Moves on, works her way up to be DA in California. And as DA of California, Kamala Harris was this absolute sheriff tossing marijuana users in the clink. I mean, just an absolute crusher. And then moves on to become a senator, where she goes from being this tough on crime DA to being the most far left senator there possibly was, out of the blue, right? It's weird. I mean, she wasn't that far left. She was this tough on crime person. Now she's out of the blue, as far left as it gets. Then from there, she decides she wants to be president. So she runs for president of the United States of America, where she does all you can possibly do to go in on the identity politics thing. She'd never really talked like that before, but all of a sudden it was, I am woman, hear me roar, look how black I am. It was endless with that. And of course, eventually, during the debates, she basically made Joe Biden look like a KKK member for something he said. And that's a big part, from what I understand, that's a big part of the rift you're seeing between the two. But what does that pattern tell you about Kamala Harris? What should it tell you? Well, she's ambitious. And I don't mean ambitious in like a healthy way that you're probably ambitious. You know, hey, I want to get that promotion. I want to succeed. I want to be the best. I want to do that. Ambition is one of those things you want your kids to have to a point. To a point. What Kamala Harris is somebody who is extremely unhappy, not content, always needing the next thing, will do anything and say anything to get ahead. Now, okay, if that's the guy down in accounting, that's one thing. If it's a politician, especially somebody like a vice president who has a massive staff, that's another. What happens is this: when you have somebody in a position of leadership, whether it be vice president, military officer, the boss in your office, maybe, whatever the case may be, if the boss over you is a ruthlessly ambitious human being like Kamala Harris is, will do anything to get ahead and get the next step, that's going to end up being a bad boss. Why? Because Kamala Harris would never look at an office full of staffers and say, yeah, my team. Hey guys, should we get pizza? Come on over for a barbecue. Let's have a get to know you session. You're never going to get that. Kamala Harris doesn't see the world that way. Kamala Harris looks around and only sees, what can I do with that person to help me get ahead? Should I butter them up? Should I crush them? Hey, staffer, why'd you make me look bad? Oh, I didn't like this outfit. Staffer, why didn't you correct that? That type of ruthless ambition, I mean, yeah, it can work out. She is the vice president after all. It got her somewhere. It can work out. It never ends in happiness, and it never ends with people around you being content, because she'll stomp on all of them in order to get ahead. That's really what's going on with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. That's the inside scoop. And the reason I bring this up tonight is, as uncomfortable as this is, let's not lose sight of the fact Kamala Harris is going to be president of the United States within the next 4 years. She just is. It doesn't take a genius to look at Joe Biden and see what's happening. And remember that ambition thing we just talked about? Oh, it hasn't stopped at the vice presidency. Remember the other day when Joe Biden's up there giving a speech, and then Kamala Harris walks up to him in front of everybody and gives him the, hey, you forgot about this, Joe. Don't think Kamala Harris did that just because she wanted him to say something. She did that, and she did that in front of everybody because she wanted to look good and she wanted to stomp on Joe Biden. You walk up to the President of the United States while he's speaking and you tell him, hey man, you forgot about this. You're not trying to inform him. You're trying to embarrass him. And mission accomplished. And look, there's tension between Jill and Kamala. The rumors are all over the place. Jill is really, really mad about Kamala Harris accusing Joe Biden of being a racist. Jill Biden's out there getting the cover of Vogue. Kamala Harris wants all the fame and glory for herself. It's really bad. And there's one more thing, the border. Let's remember, Joe Biden, as I told you, didn't I tell you this in the very beginning? When he made Kamala Harris the person in charge of the border, he was purposely setting her up for failure. Purposely setting her up for failure. That's not a situation Democrats have the political ability to resolve. They just simply do not. He took the big disaster of his presidency and said, oh, here, Kamala, got you a gift. Take this one, enjoy. And now, look, she's getting mocked by Greg Abbott.
You hear Vice President Harris talk about going down to the Northern Triangle as if solving the problem in those three countries is going to solve the problem with regard to the border. She is misleading America because the fact of the matter is there are people coming into the United States across our border from more than 150 countries across the entire globe. If she solves the problem in those three countries, which we know she can't, that means there's still more than 147 other countries to go to solve problems there. They're missing the point. There's one place to solve all the problems on the border, and that is on the border. And that's exactly where the Biden administration needs to devote their resources to get the job done.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Oh, you know what? Actually, he may be wrong about one thing. She's missing the point. She's not missing the point. She knows what's going on. She just doesn't care enough about it. And you didn't think Trump was just going to sit there like a bump on a log without getting some jabs in, did you?
So with that, we're going over to the border right now, but we're going to the real part of the border where there's real problems, not a part where you look around and you don't see anybody. We're going to admire the wall and how it works because wherever we have the wall, that's what made the big difference. It made tremendous difference.
Old Trump, still out there, still hovering out there like a gigantic monster over the GOP. I wonder if he's going to run. Remember, I don't think he's going to, but we shall see. So yes, a little palace intrigue. Let's sit back and enjoy Democrat infighting for once. All of that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. Now, you have to stop your bad habits eventually. I do too, right? Look, I still have a laundry list of them. I dipped for years, and it took me so long to quit. I tried and failed so many times because of this. When you dip for a long time or smoke for a long time, because Jake's Mint Chew works for both, when you do that, what happens is it becomes more than a nicotine addiction or a tobacco addiction. It's part of your routine. It's part of your day. For me, it was after meals. Every time I had a meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, dip went in. So when I was trying to quit, that's when I would break. I'm fine without a dip. I'm done this time. Then I get done housing a pizza. Oh, man, I got to have a dip. That's when Jake's Mint Chew comes into play. I told you just the other night, it hit me again because it still does hit me on occasion. Oh, man, I want a dip. Well, by the grace of God, I had a big box of Jake's Mint Chew CBD pouches, which I'd highly recommend, sitting right there in the house. Took one out, threw one in. I was good to go. Go to jakesmintchew.com. That's jakesmintchew.com. Use the promo code Jesse at checkout. That gets you 10% off. Now, coming up next, CNN in bed with the communists? Hang on. You know how disgusting communism is? You certainly know how much I love communism, right? China is celebrating 100 years of communism, and they're actually celebrating 100 years of communism. Well, that's disgusting. Thank goodness we here in America, all of our institutions will stand firmly against that, right? Well, everyone but CNN. CNN put out this story. I'm not even making this up. Quote, the Chinese Communist Party is about to turn 100, but Xi, meaning Xi Jinping, will be the real star. That's how we talk about communism now? That's how we talk about communism? We used to dedicate our lives in this country to stopping the human death cult that is communism. Now we have our media organizations openly supporting it. We have our representatives like this Daniel Hernandez in Arizona openly supporting it.
So we keep hearing about the threat of communism. It is a great threat. It is such a bad threat. You know, what's a bigger threat? White nationalism. The insurrection that happened on January 6th. Those are bigger threats to our nation.
That's a bigger threat, right? White nationalism? Well, this might be my favorite video I've ever seen in my life. Hong Nguyen, he had a response. You know, he escaped communism. He had a little response from Mr. Hernandez.
I just got irritated, so I came over here and pressed the white button. Is it okay if I say white button? You know, I just recently heard somebody said that white nationalism, or actually, communism is not the enemy, but white nationalism. So let me tell you something about white nationalism. White nationalism didn't drown 250,000 Vietnamese in the South China Sea. The communists did. White nationalism did not execute 86,000 South Vietnamese at the fall of Saigon. Communists did. White nationalism did not put me here. Communism did. So don't take it lightly. Don't mock me. Don't mock what I go through in life. It's rough. I lost most of my cousins, my family members, due to communism. If we don't stand up to teach communism to our children, we'll lose this country. So, sir, don't mock me. I'm pissed.
Hong Nguyen bringing the truth and bringing the pain. He's not the first. We have had people from Cuba on this show talking about communism. We've had people from the Soviet Union on this show talking about communism. We've had so many people who've escaped communism saying, it's here. Why can't you see it? Why are you allowing it to happen to you? It's here. There's that video flowing around online of a lady who escaped Chinese communism saying, it's right here. I don't just say this stuff to sound over the top. It's right here. And when you look, I mean, those numbers he just read you, those are staggering, right? That's one country. That's one country. And he didn't even come close to, because he probably didn't have time, to listing all the things that happened under the communists in Vietnam when they finally took over everything. It is a horrible, disgusting death cult, and we have an obligation to stand up against it. But back to what I said in the beginning, CNN is promoting it? This sounds like a cover of Vanity Fair with a movie star. Xi is the real star. Real star of what? The Communist Party in China. I mean, let's understand this. The Communist Party of China has killed over 70 million Chinese people. That's just their own people, starving them to death. To this day, there are concentration camps running in China, and the American media is running puff pieces on these people? Is this where we are? Man, we are in bad trouble if we can't call out communism for what it is now. Now, speaking of bad trouble, have you ever drawn your weapon out of a holster and had the holster break off your belt and come with it so you couldn't use your weapon? I have. By the grace of God, I was on the range and was not in a situation where I was about to die, but I have. That holster is not a pouch for your gun. That holster must perform. It must stay secured. It must stay strong. And that holster you have from the big box hunting store that was printed off 1,000 at a time, that's not made with quality and it's not made with care. Northwest Retention Systems makes American-made holsters custom-made holsters. I only will carry in my mag carrier, my holster. It's all Northwest Retention System gear. And my Northwest Retention Systems holster does have that join or die flag from the American Revolution all over it, so they have great designs too. Go to nwretention.com. Make sure you use the promo code Jesse at checkout. That's going to get you 10% off. We'll be back. I'm looking forward to this. Not just because I love Dave Brat, but because the topic tonight is one near and dear to my heart. Joining me now, former congressman, current dean of business at Liberty University, one of the few colleges you should even accept for your child at this point in time. Dave, what is the enigma of communism? What are you talking about? I don't understand these big words.
Yeah, well, an enigma is something that's hard to comprehend, so you're in okay shape. And it really is hard to comprehend. Marx is about 1840. He destroys the world philosophically, etc. Claims to be a philosopher, king of economics, but also a moral philosophy. He came up with his whole Marxist split of alienation and moral judgment, the scheme that's in place in this country right now in many respects. He destroys European intellectual progress. He overtakes Russia with the Russia Revolution, destroys it. Communism kills about 100 million people in the last century. He now has got inroads in China with the CCP, running the lives of 1.4 billion people, all created in the image of God, who they're repressing in ways I can't say. Now Marxist ideology has overtaken American higher education, and I'm not exaggerating. And now it's surging into K-12 education. And so the enigma is, how in the world do you take over, half of the world geographically and population, and yet no one can really tell you what Marxism is. Everything Marxist is in the K-12 education, but Karl Marx is not mentioned. And if you look at just Alistair McIntyre is a great, Aristotelian philosopher. Everybody would consider him in the top 10, Notre Dame Press. He's got a book everyone should read, Alistair McIntyre, Brief History of Ethics. There's no mention of Karl Marx. This guy has shaped the ethics of the world, right? There's the victim, and there's the oppressor. And that, in modern shorthand, is the ethics that Marx and the Marxists want us to live under. That some of us are just genetically predisposed to be oppressors, and some are oppressed. And you should have a war. You shouldn't love one another. The great golden rule, love command, is not present in Marx. He's not present in any dictionary of philosophy or any encyclopedia of philosophy. And yet he's running the world. And so that's quite an enigma, that a philosopher king, and his opposite, 180, right, is, of course, Adam Smith, kind of a Protestant free market economist. And together, those two divided the world into two. So folks that think academics have nothing to do with their lives could not be more wrong. And that's the enigma lesson of the day, Jesse.
Well, explain. I need one more lesson before we move on, and you're going to explain to us about how this got into higher education and how that's manifesting itself. But before we get there, one thing I've never figured out, Dave, is why did it catch on? Why it's such a disgusting, repulsive religion. That's what communism is. I don't even have to point out the dead bodies. It's just a disgusting religion, yet it's really, really popular, Dave. Why?
Well, and, I'll give it its due in the respect. The answer is because of inequality, right? And so in the Christian system, the Judeo-Christian West is basically the synthesis between Greek reason and the Judeo-Christian religious tradition. And so there's a command to take care of the poor, right? After preaching the gospel, it's basically the next one, take care of the poor. Well, unfortunately, human nature is fallen. Every great philosopher and theologian has agreed on that, very fallen. And so the great attraction of Marxism is that they will use coercion, not freedom. Our system is built on individual freedom and rights. But the Marxists want to coerce you And that's the interesting thing, right? They don't coerce themselves. They coerce you and others to follow their moral dictates to take care of the poor. And so it sounds fantastic. It's like, wow, somebody cares. But then they seize power, and the Marxists and the communists and the socialists that seize power never seem to take care of the poor. And in this country, they're making a case that they care about the poor and minority concern. But the big tech guys are all on the left pushing some of this Marxist stuff, and none of them are sharing their great billions and billions of dollars with the poor. And they're not proposing to help kids in inner city schools with their test scores so they can have a life. And so that's why it's successful, right? And so in higher ed, they don't want to put up with this freedom and, hey, you got to change human nature, right? And in the Christian tradition, you try to encourage people to help the poor and to do good, but you're free to do so. The great attraction and the reason it's successful in higher ed and K-12 is because we are going to coerce you to believe what we do. And boy, that's a doozy.
Is freedom able to withstand it? It hasn't so far, Dave. I ask this question a lot. Are free-loving people, or freedom-loving people, I should say, are freedom-loving people, are they able to withstand the relentless onslaught of the communist hordes? We've not done it in America. Is it possible?
Left to itself, freedom alone is not powerful enough to pull that off, right? What it took is a philosophy and a theology and a worldview that was strong. And that's the Christian West, right? The Greek reason from Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, combined with the Judeo-Christian religious tradition, formed into the Constitution through James Madison, who went to Princeton Seminary, et cetera, and wrote he was the first graduate student of Hebrew, right? The Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament. And he knew human nature and wove that logic into our Constitution. And that Constitution informed our free market economic system. And that totality, that worldview has served us so well, it's incredible. But the left doesn't like it because they're not in charge of it. And so they want to tear it down in spite of the unimaginable success it's brought in terms of freedom, but more important in terms of human welfare and the freedom to worship and the dignity it bestows on each of us. And so, freedom alone won't cut the mustard.
Okay, well, look, universities being communist training camps is not exactly news. It's certainly not news to anybody who watches this show. But K through 12, it worming its way down there, I think that probably will be a shock to some people. What are you talking about, Dave?
Yeah, well, the parents, have always thought, hey, my local school board, my teachers are like me. They're in my community. Everything's fine and dandy until COVID. And they started seeing some of the lessons at home virtually. And they fell off their couches and said, what are you teaching my kid? I got a third grader and you're telling them they're morally guilty for being white? And you're telling my kid, if I'm African-American Christian, that my kid is oppressed? I don't want to hear it no matter who I am. That's not the totality of my kid. My kid is made in the image of God. I want my kid to have a successful life. I want them to be free, and I wanted them to be treated equally and with respect by everyone. I don't want a war in this country. We've gotten done with wars. Let's not do that. And so the parents at home have been listening to this indoctrination. It's the furthest thing from education and the Socratic method of debate, right? Going back and forth. You ask questions. Socrates was the greatest teacher ever. And that's what we got to get back to, reading, writing, arithmetic, and some philosophy and the basic human truth.
Are parents, now I know they're more awake than they were, Dave. I know that. Are they awake enough? Are they awake enough? Because that's the ultimate question, right? I can understand, all right, I don't want little Billy to learn that he's racist, but are they really aware of how American history is even taught in K through 12? Because it's really bad, Dave.
No. A very small percentage are finally starting to catch on. That word's going to get out this fall. It's going to spread. But it's also a lack of courage, too, right? Everybody wants to be liked and loved. That's the key word. And that virtue, love, came about and originated, roughly speaking, in the year 0 with Christ, right? That was not a dominant virtue the Greeks had or the Romans had. And so it's interesting. Ask yourself tonight around the dinner table, the families that are listening, name something that Jesus did that was loving. And you'll be stumped. You'll be trying to come up with some warm, sentimental, weird. Did Jesus go around hugging people and saying, hey, I love you, I'm okay, you're okay, slap people on? No. What he did was sacrifice his life for others. That was love, right? And so we've gotten warm and rich and lazy in the Western tradition. And we got to get back to reality that the purpose of life, right, especially if you believe that there's an infinity facing us, love, take a look at what love really means. And the good book's a place to start.
Dave, Brad, everybody. Dave, thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Yep. Love you, Jesse. Thanks, man. Take care.
Dave's awesome. All right. Do you own a home? If you own a home, you understand it's your biggest financial vulnerability, right? If you don't have home title lock, these cyber criminals, they're hunting for you right now. Listen, here's one of them.
Nobody thinks that I can take their house and borrow against the house. No, I have title insurance for that. No, it's in my name, or he would have to get some special document. They would call me. Nobody's calling you. After I've stolen the title, borrowed against it, or sold the property, or done whatever I've done with it, it's 60 to 90 days to even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. By that point, you start getting foreclosure notices, and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house. Not only that, you don't even own your home anymore. It's not even in your name.
Don't let it happen to you. All you have to do is one simple step. Home title lock will determine if there's any tampering at all, and they'll stop it right now. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and sign up today. Make sure you use the promo code RADIO when you get there. That gets you 30 days for free. HomeTitleLock.com. We'll be back. Well, it's time to introduce a lady who doesn't really need an introduction on this show anymore. Dr. Nan Hayworth. She was a former congressman, obviously a doctor. Now she's with the Independent Women's Forum. Always has something smart to say. Nan, before we get going on communism, which I love talking about anyway, Arizona, the Supreme Court made some 6-3 decision, but I went to community college. I don't understand any of it. What happened in the Supreme Court, Nan?
Well, the Supreme Court today allowed to stand the Arizona laws that restrict ballot harvesting most conspicuously, and that require that votes that are cast outside of the precinct in which the voter lives have to be discarded completely. Both of those are strong measures that protect ballot integrity and chain of custody, which is an evergreen, universal, and completely impartial issue. So bravo, Supreme Court.
Nan, let's act like I was just beamed down here from Mars, and I've never heard the word ballot harvesting before. Because I know, look, we toss it around a lot, but there are a lot of people who scratch their heads and aren't sure what we're talking about. Would you break it down dummy style for me?
Well, I'll break it down so that an intelligent person who's unfamiliar with it can understand what it is. But essentially what ballot harvesting means is that a third party, whether that be an individual or a member of an organization, typically they're members of organized efforts, can collect absentee ballots. Those, of course, can be mailed to people for vote by mail, or they can have been requested as absentee ballots. But those ballots can be requested by a third party and then transmitted by that third party to the Board of Elections. So the problem, of course, is that the third party could conceivably manipulate those ballots.
Yes, I've heard one or two rumors about such things. I know personally they prey on nursing homes a lot where they send a bunch of these. They'll send representatives there and just collect them for confused people and then fill them out themselves. Not that any of this has ever happened here in America, because we've never had an election that was a little wonky. But speaking of which, Nan, let's just stay on that subject right here. This is from Pix 11 in New York. Quote, Board of Elections, 135,000 test ballots made it into Tuesday's NYC, that's New York City, mayoral primary numbers. Nan, what's a test ballot? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a lot of test ballots. But Jesse, imagine, so this is ranked choice voting, in which ballots can be completed with as many choices in ranked order for every voter who participates. So in ranked order for as many candidates as are in the primary for whom they want to vote. So I think in this mayoral primary, there were probably at least 8 people. So the mathematical permutations of the ranked choice system allow for sufficient complexities that they might indeed need a large number of ballots to test the system. But the claim is that they were testing the system and its computational accuracy, et cetera, and forgot to take those test ballots out of the system.
I just forgot, of course. Whoops, who hasn't spilled milk every now and then? All right, Nan, I don't want to ever be conspiracy theorist guy and assign malice to every single thing that happens, because politicians in general are very stupid people. Could this be just something totally innocent, Nan?
Yes, conceivably, yes, Jesse, given what Michael Goodwin of the New York Post described, the New York City Board of Elections could ruin a sunny day. So, it's conceivable that, it was just an error, but certainly it raises concerns because, speaking as a physician, anytime there's an error, anytime we spot a deficiency, we have immediately to be very concerned that it could happen again and, to identify how it happened, diagnose it. Where is the problem? Well, the problem is likely to be in the personnel of the New York City Board of Elections, who are largely, as I understand it, kind of patronage employees and not necessarily the greatest talents for the job.
The Board of Elections, Nan, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but I'm just very curious. How does one even get on the Board of Elections? Is this appointed? Are these people elected? Where do they come from? Who are these people?
The familiarity that I have with boards of elections is in the counties north of New York City. But certainly, folks are selected by political parties to serve on the Board of Elections.
Okay.
Doesn't mean, I don't suppose that, somebody could come in and apply to be a member, an employee of the Board of Elections, but they tend to be political patronage jobs.
Nan, who was Vladimir Lenin?
Well, Vladimir Lenin was first and foremost a psychopath who grew up in reduced circumstances relative to the aristocracy in pre-Soviet Russia, and proceeded to become, by force of his violent personality, the leading figure in the Russian Revolution.
Nan, did Lenin believe that communism should ever stop being a revolution, or did he believe that revolution should be continuous all the time? So you don't really ever set a specific goal, because if you reach that goal, then you can't revolt anymore.
Right. He said that revolution should be continuous, and indeed his actions during the extremely bloody years of his prominence in Soviet politics were characterized by complete arbitrariness. There was no baseline. There were no sets of principles. There was no North Star. This was not about actually cogently instituting a government that would protect the rights and safety of the people. It was strictly about acquiring power and then exerting power through violence, through death, through bloodshed. just it's institutionalized psychopathy.
Nan, Liz Cheney, she's been selected, agreed to be on Nancy Pelosi's January 6th commission. Psychologize Liz Cheney as best you can for me. It's such an odd turn for me from a basically political royalty, very safe seat, to doing what it appears to be just throwing it all away on purpose. What am I looking at?
Representative Cheney, whom I really don't know personally, but I do remember vividly that her first foray into Wyoming politics was to primary Senator Mike Enzi, who was a perfectly fine guy and Republican. So what that was about was a head scratcher to begin with. And then she ended up abandoning that effort. And when Cynthia Lummis, who was a tremendous and great Republican, and I served with Cynthia Lummis in the House she was from Wyoming at large, Liz Cheney was able to run successfully for that seat. But she has interpreted that as meaning that she has complete license to go her own way versus the ascendant energy in the party. And while I understand that, yes, we are all bound to follow our consciences, that's all true. If we care about the success of our party, then we should all endeavor, especially when she was in GOP leadership, to stay on the same page, to be unified. If you have nothing nice to say about President Trump, then just keep your mouth shut.
What a concept that would be. Nan, what's the state of the GOP?
You know, I'm hopeful, Jesse. I really am, because I see really inspiring leaders on our side of the aisle. And they do represent the diversity of the party. And indeed, there is a certain amount, obviously, yes, of ideological diversity. But I really think we have incredibly fine, inspiring people who are breaking through despite the dominant media's dogged efforts. And indeed, Facebook now is posting warnings to people. Talk about Leninism, talk about Stalinism. This is modern day Stalinism. They're asking us to inform on our neighbors and friends. Do you think one of your friends may be becoming an extremist? I think that is scaring Americans. And if Republicans can embrace, the personal liberties aspect of what we so proudly represent, I think we have good prospects going forward.
Nan Hayworth, everybody. Thank you, Nan. I love you.
Thank you. You too, Jesse. Thank you. Always a privilege.
All right. It's time to lighten the mood. Let's shoot some pool. Hang on. In the past, I have been accused of being a misogynist. I don't know where these accusations have come from. I am just going to put them to rest right now. I am a huge supporter of women's sports. So when we see a female athlete out there doing what they do best, I feel the need to bring attention to it. I'm no misogynist. Enjoy this. I'll see you tomorrow.